I've had the pleasure to be elected to represent the West Midlands in the European Parliament alongside my colleagues Bill Etheridge and Jill Seymour. And it's something we take very seriously because the West Midlands is a very, very special place. Many years ago, the city of 1,000 trades, Birmingham, that's what it was called. The Black Country was called the workshop of the world. And that really sums up what Britain is about, because arguably that great European, I might have a different approach, Napoleon Bonaparte, described Britain as a nation of shopkeepers. And that's what makes us so very different to the other 27 members of the European Union. We as a party, we as a country, have developed and built arguably the largest empire in the history of mankind. And we built trading links across the world. And I find it quite ironic that I'm elected to represent a party that seeks to regain our independence from the European Union. And yet, as a nation, we have given independence to over a third of the world. And it's my contention that UKIP is very much a forward-looking party. We're the party that are looking to the future. Because after 42 years membership of the European Union, I think it's quite clear that the European Union doesn't work. And very much, as a small businessman, the ladies amongst us tonight will agree, if you're running an organisation that doesn't work, you look for a way out. And that is what UKIP is about. We're not being negative. We've been members of this organisation since 1973, 1st of January 1973, we joined. But of course we didn't join the European Union. We joined what was then a European Economic Community. And we were sold the promise that it was all about trade. It was all about free trade. It was all about cheap wine. We weren't sold the lie, and it was a lie, our politicians lied to us, but it was all about political union. And we were lied to, because the Prime Minister who took us in at the time, Edward Heath, and his Foreign Secretary at the time was a former British Prime Minister, one of the old venerable gentlemen of politics of the last century, Alec Douglas-Home. You may remember he was Lord Hugh. He renounced his peerage and went to the House of Commons. Well, Alec Douglas-Home was Foreign Secretary at the time that we joined the Common Market. And there were various negotiations and meetings, and there was a cabinet meeting, the very first cabinet meeting dealing with European issues after we joined the Common Market in January 1973. And it was in the build-up to a European summit. And top of the agenda, in January 1973, the subsection said Economic and Monetary Union. And dear old Douglas-Home looked at this and he said, the House won't like this, Ted, talking about the House of Commons, he said, the House won't like this. And he turned around and said, well, that's what it's all about, Alec. That's what it's all about. So be under no illusion, our political classes have lied to us from the very start before, in the run-up to joining the Common Market, and ever since. And we find a situation now where our own Prime Minister, we've heard about today's debacle over the 1.7 billion requirements from the European Commission. And of course that formula has been worked out. We need to make that budget payment to support the European budget and give rebates to Germany and France and countries that haven't done so well over the last period. But the period we're talking about actually goes back to 1995. So quite out of, we're not talking about recent years. We all know about the economic crisis across the world, certainly across Europe, certainly across the Eurozone. But this goes back to 1995. The way the calculations have been made. It's included some very, very bizarre formulas, very, very bizarre business practices. And two of those business practices have been included to help the European Commission form that opinion is prostitution and drug dealing. Money spent in Britain on those two illicit, illegal trades. But that just sums up how stupid these people are. Don't they understand and don't they appreciate that pimps and drug dealers don't declare that as an income, so the exchequer doesn't benefit from it? And this sums up the situation we're in. I find myself elected, I'm one of your 7 elected members of the European Parliament. I find myself elected to an institution where, as a so-called parliamentarian, well, I refuse to call it a parliament, I refer to it as a chamber of horrors, but as a so-called parliamentarian, I've been elected to an institution where I don't even have the ability to initiate legislation. That's a ridiculous situation. So how does that make me a parliamentarian? And what we find now is just this outpouring of regulation. And if I tell you that the Lord's Prayer runs to 56 words, the 10 Commandments are 297, the American Declaration of Independence runs to 300 words, but the European Union Directive with regard to the exportation of duck eggs runs to 26,911 words. And that just about sums up the situation we're in. So if anybody says UKIP is a negative party, we're not a negative party, we're a positive party. Because after all these years' membership, we've come to the conclusion that this institution, this organisation, doesn't fit the British model. And indeed, when Harold Macmillan wanted to take Britain into the common market in the 60s, Charles de Gaulle, President de Gaulle, used his veto. And he said Britain, by her nature, by her business customs, are distinctly different to the continental way, and they're not suitable for membership. And the reason we're not suitable for membership, I said, because of those global trading links we have. So what I want to do, I want to look further than the European Union. I actually want to be engaging with the wider world. We in UKIP believe we need to be engaging with the emerging markets. Brazil, Mexico, Thailand, Vietnam. These are the places that are coming forward. South America. And there's another institution that people are almost embarrassed to talk about now. And that's an institution that makes up 15% of the world's wealth and 25% of the world's population. It's also an institution that speaks a common language, the global international business language, and that language, of course, is English language. And it's also an organisation that has exactly the same business practices, and their own common law is based on British common law. And of course the organisation I'm talking about is the Commonwealth. And it's my contention we need to actually be re-engaging in a year where we commemorate the 100th anniversary of the start of the first of 2 bloody world wars, where so many of our kith and kin from across the globe laid down their lives, and we drop them like a hot potato. And I'll hear my opponents say, oh well, it's too late, you want the empire back. No, we don't want the empire back. We want to engage with countries that are really pushing forward. By 2050, India is now seriously reckoned to be the largest economy in the world. So it strikes me that we should be building on those things. There are so many British citizens who have their own links from 2 or 3 generations back with those countries. Surely that's a huge asset. That gives us a great head start. And the way to be doing it is being that nation of shopkeepers, being those wheeler dealers. But we can only do that if we have a bonfire of the regulation. We've heard about that before. Neil spoke about it earlier. And the only way we can deregulate in this country is by leaving the European Union. Because at the moment, 75% of the laws that govern the productive sector of our economy emanate in the form of a regulation or a directive passed by one of the European institutions. Now that cannot be right. That cannot be right, because if we want to have any change to any of these regulations, and this is why Mr Cameron can't renegotiate, and that has been proved and underlined so many times of late, we need unanimity. we need all 28 member states to agree to repeal a certain directive, or a regulation that we have a peculiar interest in. And of course, more often than not, both that directive or that regulation actually doesn't suit the British business model. So it puts us at an economic disadvantage against our so-called trading partners and political partners, if you like, in the European Union. So why would they want to give us the upper hand? I don't want to do that. So I say it's very clear. And I have to find myself agreeing with a former president of the European Commission, the late Roy Jenkins, former leader of the SDP. And I'm a pro-European, but he had the honesty to declare his position. And he said, many years ago, he said there are now only two clear and consistent positions with regards to Britain's membership of the European Union. Those being all in or all out. And he's right, because we have reached a stage where we have to be brave. I believe we have two choices. Like Roy Jenkins said, we either go wholehearted for Europe and eventually join a single currency, eventually get, opt into those areas where we have managed to keep an opt-out at the moment, or we have to back off completely and withdraw. Well, of course, I'd take the latter approach. Because what we can't do is carry on as we go. I'm a small businessman, I'm an umbrella maker. I used to do a bit of wholesaling. And if I go and buy, I'll go and see one of my suppliers and go and buy a couple of pallets of umbrellas, which I'd sell on to retailers, the like. And I'd go and have a deal. And I'd walk into the warehouse and I could see in the corner 2 or 3 pallets that way, all sorts of mixes of umbrellas. And I'd say, okay David, what's the deal? And he'd say, right, that lot there, £3,000. Pull the figure out the air. And I'd look at it, but in the corner, I'd see a quarter of a pallet of bright luminous yellow or pink or some taupe or ghastly colour, which I know I couldn't give away as raffle prizes. I know in the month of Sundays I'm never going to be able to sell those ghastly taupe pink or purple umbrellas, or bright yellow sort of things recommended by the Tufty Club, for road safety. And that's showing my age now, isn't it? And but I couldn't say to my supplier, right, I want to have a deal, but I don't want those there. He'd say, no, that's the deal. You take the good with the bad. And that is exactly the same principle with regards to Britain's membership of the European Union. We cannot pick and choose and say, we have the good bits, you have the bad bits. That's not good business. And it actually is not fair on the other members of the European Union. It's not in their interest. And why would they agree to that? Of course they wouldn't. If I was one of them, I wouldn't agree to that. And this is exactly where we are. So we have to be bold. And for Mr Cameron to be carrying on with that mindset, to me he's acting like King Canute, sitting on the shore, commanding an end to the tide of regulations that are coming in. And of course we all know what happened to him. There are now only two clear and consistent positions. And I believe the position we need to be taking is by leaving the European Union. But what our opponents are saying, they're actually underlining our own lack of belief in our country. Because they're saying we need to be in Europe. We don't need to be in Europe. Not at all. We can still form trade negotiations, trade agreements with Europe, and actually we'll be in a far stronger position. Because at the moment, Britain doesn't go, when there's a round of World Trade Organisations, doesn't go and negotiate. The British government don't send their trade minister along to negotiate. But all trade negotiations at that World Trade Organisation are now carried out by the European Commissioner for Trade. I can't remember the name of the new one, it's because they just changed over this week. But previously it was a Belgian gentleman called Coran de Hout. And Mr de Hout would go along, sit at the World Trade Organisation, he'd be in the front row, and the 28 member states would have their people behind. But the trade negotiations were carried out by the Commission. So our opponents say we lose influence if we leave, if we leave the European Union? How will we lose influence? Because we'll be in a position to not only negotiate our trade agreements, but we have so many other organisations that we've looked at. We've got a seat on the Security Council of the United Nations. And we're a member of the Commonwealth, as I've said. In fact, just for G8, there are so many different organisations that we have that special influence and relationship with. And I actually think when we leave the European Union, and we will leave the European Union, because I don't think it's stoppable now, because politics has changed. And I think that when we leave the European Union, we're going to get on a lot better with our continental neighbours. I really believe we will. But what I think they're frightened of is that when we leave the European Union, so will other countries. I think Holland will follow us out. I think some of the Scandinavian countries will follow us out. And the whole thing will collapse. I'm convinced of it.
Deck of cards.
Yeah, and I think the French will go as well. I really, really do. So we have to look for a positive future. Because as I said, we believe in our country. We believe in reducing the burden of regulation. Of course, we have to have health and safety laws. We have to have protection for workers, but it has to be a two-way relationship. It has to be for the benefit, whereas Neil said, where our small employers, and let's be blunt, it's the small and medium enterprises that are the lifeblood of the British economy. And they're the ones who suffer at the hands of EU regulation. Because the big corporations, they're the people who can employ their own internal auditors and bureaucrats to comply with the regulations, which actually make it harder for the small and medium enterprises. So if we look to the future outside, I think it's a very, very exciting time, because we can release our small business to get back to what they're doing, increasing employment, giving our youngsters a chance. And just one example of one of the policies that the UK government proposes would be to actually bring in, I say discrimination, but giving priority to our own British youngsters.
Yeah.
Because to my mind, this open door policy of free movement is ridiculous. Because what it does, it allows an oversupply of unskilled labour. Now, if you look back to previous generation, look at myself. I learnt skills by starting the hard way. I'd go and sort of help my father in the umbrella factory and sort of watch and learn. And I learnt skills, learnt various ways of doing various tasks in regards to making different umbrellas and whatnot. And I learnt that by starting at the bottom and working my way up. And that's right the way across business. And that to me gives our youngsters an opportunity to learn and develop their own business models, develop their own business practices. But of course, while we have this oversupply of cheap, unskilled labour, it doesn't encourage long-term success for that company, to my mind, because there is a lot of changeover of staff, and our own youngsters have that great unquantifiable cost, loss of pride. And this is one of the many reasons I believe we are seeing a breakdown in society, because more and more of our youngsters feel worthless. Youth unemployment in this country is around about 20% now, just below 20%. And that's with the figures massage. That cannot be good for the future of our country. So I say, if you want a positive future for our country, if you believe in our country, there's only one party to go for, and that's my party, that's the party I belong to, UKIP. Because not since the birth of Keir Hardie's Labour Party have the British people been so ready for a completely different political message. Because the British people now realise that they've been let down by what we refer to as the Lib Lab Con. They've realised that they are hell-bent on Britain's membership of the European Union. They can't see the flexibility that Britain needs to recover from this devastating economic crisis. And they really can't see our true potential. So please, if you're not already a member, support us, join us, become active with us. Because I believe inside the European Union, our future is as a clan. but outside the world is our oyster.